My mother smiled as she sliced the cake and said it like a joke. "I wish you were never born." Everyone laughed except me. I didn't argue. I just smiled back and whispered, "You'll regret saying that." That night, I made a decision no one saw coming. 2 months later, their dinner table sat untouched. Their calls went unanswered, and the one person they'd spent years ignoring became the ghost they couldn't stop talking about. You think silence means surrender? Not this time. Because what I did next turned that wish into something they'd never forget. When people ask what kind of family I come from, I never know where to start. On paper, we look perfect. A big house on Maple Drive, family photos and matching sweaters and holiday cards that made us look close enough to be enviable. But if you looked closely, if you sat at our table for even 5 minutes, you'd feel it. The quiet hierarchy, the invisible ranking that placed me last without anyone needing to say it aloud. Jessica, my older sister, the golden child, flawless grades, flawless career, flawless smile. Amanda, the youngest, the creative one, always messy, but adored for it. And me, Layla, the middle child, the peacekeeper, the listener, the one who filled the space between their noise. I was the family's emotional janitor, quietly cleaning up after every argument, making sure no one broke completely. Our house smelled like lemon polish and control. Mom ran it like a stage manager, dinners at 6 sharp compliments, flowing only in one direction. "Jessica, that dress is perfect." "Amanda, you're such an artist." Me, I was the audience applauding, forgotten, fading into the wallpaper. Even my father, gentle but distant, lived by Mom's script. When she rolled her eyes at me, he stayed silent, pretending not to notice. I used to think love meant endurance. If I kept showing up, birthdays, dinners, holidays, maybe they'd finally see me. But invisibility can become a habit. You start believing it's safer not to be seen at all. That night, the night of the wish, the house looked beautiful. Candles, lit lasagna, baking the kind of scent that should have meant comfort. But underneath, there was tension, thin humming, ready to snap. Mom had spent all day fussing over the table, adjusting napkins, polishing silver. Jessica had just been promoted to senior partner at her law firm, and this dinner was her victory parade. Amanda fluttered around, showing off paint-stained fingers and talking about her next big piece. Everyone leaned in, laughed, clinked glasses. When it was my turn to speak, I mentioned one of my students, how she'd just won a regional writing award. I'd mentored her for months, stayed late after class, helped her believe she could be more. Mom smiled politely, already turning away. "That's nice, honey. Just tell us more about that case you won." I felt it again, that quiet dismissal, the subtle shift that told me I didn't belong in their spotlight. I took another sip of wine and forced a smile, the kind that hurts your cheeks. That's when I realized my whole life I'd been fighting for a seat at their table without noticing the table was rotten underneath. Later that night, as I helped clear the plates, I watched Jessica and Amanda laugh in the kitchen, their reflections glowing against the window. Mom stood behind them, proud, radiant. I caught my own reflection beside theirs, faint, ghostly half there. And I thought maybe disappearing isn't the worst thing. Maybe it's the only way to finally be seen. The days after that dinner blurred together like static work, sleep, repeat. But something inside me had shifted. My students noticed before I did. "You okay, Ms. Lawson?" one of them asked after class, eyes wide with concern. I told her I was fine, that adults just get tired sometimes. But the truth was I wasn't tired. I was done. That night kept replaying in my head like a song. I couldn't turn off the laughter, the way Mom dabbed her mouth with her napkin after saying those words, as if she'd just commented on the weather. "I wish you were never born." It wasn't new. She'd said it before, in smaller ways. Every time she forgot my birthday, every time she called me sweetheart in that dismissive tone that meant background character. But this time it landed differently. Maybe because I finally heard it for what it was, permission. For years I'd mistaken patience for love, silence for peace. But the moment she laughed, I saw the truth. My family's happiness was built on my erasure, and I had been keeping it alive by staying. I started to notice how deep that pattern ran. At school, I'd check my phone during lunch, nothing, not a text, not a call. But the family group chat buzzed constantly. Photos from Jessica's firm party, Amanda's new painting, Mom's girls' night captions that somehow never included me. I used to scroll through and feel the sting of it. Now I just stared and thought, they won't even notice when I'm gone. One Friday evening, I drove past the old house after work. Lights were on, laughter spilling through the open window. I sat there in my car engine idling, watching the silhouettes move inside. For a second, I imagined walking in like nothing happened, saying, "Hey, it's me." I brought dessert. But then I saw Mom hug Amanda, the same way she used to hug me when I was little before I learned that affection had conditions. The ache in my chest turned sharp. I drove away. At home, I opened my laptop and started typing teaching jobs in other cities. It felt impulsive, but my fingers didn't hesitate. Seattle, Portland, Denver. Each name looked like a door cracked open. The next week, I boxed up the family photos, every frame, every forced smile. I slid them into a drawer and taped it shut. My apartment looked emptier, but I could finally breathe. I stopped answering calls. Then I stopped returning texts. Silence stretched between us like a bridge burning from both ends. 3 weeks later, Mom left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, call us back. We're worried." But her voice didn't sound worried, it sounded inconvenienced. I deleted it before she finished. That's when I realized this wasn't a phase. It was an awakening. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be invited. I was planning my exit. The morning I mailed my resignation letter, Seattle's address typed clean at the bottom, I felt something I hadn't in years: stillness. Not peace exactly, but a strange, weightless quiet. I stood in my kitchen holding that envelope, realizing this was the last tie to the life that kept me small. Once I sent it, there was no going back. I dropped it into the blue mailbox outside my building, and the clink of metal sounded like a door locking behind me. After that, I went invisible on purpose. I changed my number, set my email to forward to a new account, and told no one. The silence that used to scare me started to feel like power. Each day I walked into my empty apartment, and instead of loneliness, I heard my own thoughts for the first time. No voices telling me what to do, no laughter at my expense, just the hum of my freedom. It didn't take long for the calls to start piling up. Unknown numbers, private calls, voicemails full of confusion. "Layla, this isn't funny. Where are you? You can't just vanish like that." I listened to a few, mostly Jessica's voice, clipped and urgent, but I never called back. Each deleted message felt like a boundary solidifying another thread I didn't have to untangle. Then came the one that made me pause. It was my mother crying. "Sweetheart, please, come home. Amanda's worried. Your father can't sleep." I could almost picture her hand pressed to her temple, dramatic as ever, but the words didn't reach me anymore. She had laughed when Amanda wished I didn't exist. Now she was begging for the very presence she erased. That irony tasted sweet. By the 5th week, word started getting back to me through cousins and old neighbors. Jessica was snapping at clients, Amanda stopped painting. My parents fought constantly. Without me there to absorb their chaos, it turned inward. They were finally forced to face each other without a scapegoat. I didn't plan revenge. I just let absence do the work. Sometimes the most powerful strike is simply refusing to show up for your own execution. The day the movers came, I stood by the window watching my furniture disappear piece by piece. Each box carried out was like proof I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. Seattle waited on the other side of that road, gray skies and all. When the last box was loaded, I looked around the empty space and smiled. For the first time in my life, I was leaving, not because they pushed me out, but because I finally wanted to go. Seattle greeted me with rain, the soft kind that never really stops. I rented a small apartment near the school that had hired me, a narrow place with creaky floors and tall windows. On my first morning, I walked to class carrying a coffee I brewed myself, not the kind I used to grab in a rush, before driving across town for another family dinner. There were no calls to return, no expectations to meet, just me and the sound of students filing into the room. For the first time in my life, I felt seen because I was finally standing in my own light. My new principal, Mr. Reynolds, called me the calm in the storm. My students listened when I spoke. They laughed at my jokes. They handed me drawings, poems, thank you notes, little reminders that presents didn't have to be begged for, it could be given freely. Every smile, every thank you, Ms. Lawson, was a quiet antidote to the years I'd spent invisible. But even freedom has echoes. About 2 months after the move, the past began clawing its way back. It started with an email. No subject line, no name, just a few words. "Please come home, we need you." I deleted it without reading the rest. Then came a letter forwarded from my old address, my mother's handwriting looping and perfect. "Your father's not well. Jessica's having trouble. Amanda misses you." I didn't answer. Instead, I sat on my balcony that night listening to the rain against the railing. For years, I had mistaken being needed for being loved. Now I saw the difference. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them, the listener, the peacemaker, the convenient daughter who never fought back. Without me, they had to face the noise they'd spent a lifetime covering with laughter. Weeks passed. Then one Friday evening, a knock echoed through my apartment. I froze. When I opened the door, Jessica was standing there, perfect hair ruined by rain, eyes rimmed red. "You really weren't going to tell us where you went," she said. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't anger, it was disbelief. I let her in. She looked around like she was walking through someone else's life. "Mom's losing it," she said. "Amanda blames me. Dad barely talks. It's chaos." I sipped my tea and waited. "You sound surprised." She frowned. "You don't get it. You're the glue. When you left, everything fell apart. That word glue made me laugh. No, Jess, I wasn't glue, I was tape. Temporary. You all just got used to me patching the cracks." Her jaw tightened. "You're cruel." I set my cup down. "No, I just stopped volunteering for pain." Jessica sat there in silence, watching me. I could tell she didn't recognize me anymore. I wasn't the quiet sister she could guilt into showing up. I was someone she couldn't control. When she left, she said, "Mom's sick. You should call her." I almost did. But then I remembered that night, the laughter, the fork scraping against the plate, her eyes gleaming as she said, "I wish you were never born. A mother's sickness can't erase a daughter's ghost." I didn't call. After that visit, they tried harder. Letters, voicemails. Even Amanda sent one, her voice shaky for once. "I didn't mean it, Layla. Please, just come home." I played it twice, waiting to feel something. I didn't, because what she called home had never really been mine. And then the photo came. It was sent from a cousin I barely spoke to. A picture of my parents' dining table, the same one where I'd been erased 100 times. Except this time only 2 plates were set. No candles, no laughter. The caption read, "Thanksgiving's not the same without you." I stared at it for a long time, not out of sadness, but because the table looked smaller, diminished. Empty in a way no decoration could fix. They'd built their happiness around my silence, and when that silence left, everything caved in. By Christmas, I learned through another relative that Jessica had moved out after a fight with Amanda. Dad started sleeping in the den. Mom stopped hosting dinners. Their perfect family portrait cracked from the inside. Meanwhile, my world was expanding. My students nominated me for Teacher of the Year. My colleagues called me family. I'd never heard the word sound so clean. One rainy afternoon, I stopped at a small bookstore. That's where I met David. He was standing in the fiction aisle arguing with himself about which book to buy. I teased him for it, and he laughed, really laughed. It wasn't the kind of laughter that cut. It was the kind that healed. We started talking, then coffee, then dinners. I told him about Seattle, but not about where I came from. Not yet. It felt like introducing a ghost into a new house. One evening, as we walked home in the drizzle, he said, "You have this quiet strength, like someone who's rebuilt herself." I smiled. "You have no idea. Months turned into a year. My life filled with warmth that didn't demand anything in return. When David proposed, it wasn't on a stage or in front of a crowd, it was in our kitchen. Barefoot, his voice shaking as he said, "Let's build something real." Our wedding was small. My coworkers came. A few close friends. No family. Not one chair reserved for ghosts. But even from across the country, the past still tried to knock. A letter arrived 2 days after our ceremony. I recognized the handwriting before I opened it, my mother's. Inside a single page, I heard you got married. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. Come home when you're ready. I folded it once and slipped it into the drawer with the rest of her apologies. Forgiveness isn't an invitation. That night, as I danced barefoot in the living room with David, I felt something click inside me, a quiet kind of closure. Maybe they'd never understand what they lost. Maybe that was the point. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's peace that refuses to return. And when peace stays long enough, it becomes something stronger than any apology freedom. Years passed quietly, the kind of peace that used to feel impossible. My mornings began with sunlight slipping through the curtains, the smell of coffee, and David humming somewhere in the kitchen. At school, students filled my days with laughter and purpose. My life wasn't grand, but it was mine, built brick by brick out of choices I made, not roles I inherited. When our daughter was born, we named her Hope. The first time I held her, she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, and I promised her something no one ever promised me, that she would never have to earn love by disappearing. She would grow up knowing she mattered just by being herself. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if my parents ever really changed, if they sat in that quiet house and thought about the daughter they pushed away. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate keeps you tethered, and I was done being tied to that table. I forgave them, not for them, but for me, because forgiveness is freedom, and mine had already begun. One afternoon, I found that old letter again, folded and worn. I read it once more, then set it in the fireplace. The flame caught fast, curling the paper into light. As the ashes faded, I whispered, "Be careful what you wish for Mom." She wished I'd never been born. But the woman I became, this life, this family, this peace, was proof that sometimes being erased is exactly how you start over. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I know what that silence feels like. I know what it's like to smile through dinners where you're only half alive, to wonder if leaving means losing everything. But here's the truth. They only notice your absence when you finally stop begging to be seen. And when you do, the world opens in ways you never imagined. My story isn't about revenge anymore. It's about reclaiming my name, my peace, and the right to exist without apology. So if you're watching this and something in you aches, listen to that voice. Walk away if you must. Start again if you can. You're not disposable. You're just done shrinking. If this story touched you, hit like, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes walking away is the loudest answer of all.